Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. State elections in Berlin this past weekend have resulted in another setback for Angela Merkel and her Christian Democratic Union Party, which received just under 18% of the vote. The German capital now looks set to be governed by a more left-leaning coalition. We'll consider how this affects the national outlook in Germany with the backdrop of growing protests against transatlantic trade proposals and an EU facing fracture and uncertainty in the wake of the ongoing refugee crisis, Brexit, and the rise of nationalist parties. To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department for European Studies of the China Institute of International Studies, and Michele Garacci, Head of the China Economic Policy Program at Nottingham University Business School, China. We'll also speak to Fraser Cameron, Director of the EU Asia Center, via telephone. But before we begin our discussion, let's take a look at this.
17.6% of the vote. That's the latest defeat for Angela Merkel's Christian Democratic Union in German local elections, and the party's worst showing in Berlin since the end of World War II. While the anti-immigrant Alternative for Germany party, which was founded just 3 years ago, is poised to enter the state legislature for the first time. And one of the primary reasons is the refugee issue. Under Merkel's policy, Germany took in more than 1 million refugees in 2015, making it the most open country in Europe to asylum seekers. Of those, more than 70,000 went to the capital. Amid terror attacks and public security incidents, criticism and anti-immigrant sentiment have grown stronger in German society, and approximately 1,000 xenophobic incidents took place in the country last year, 5 times more than the previous year. Although this election was for the regional parliament and has little direct impact on the federal government, some experts warn that Chancellor Merkel would do best to take it as a wake-up call, especially with little more than a year to go before the 2017 general election. A survey published last week by Forsa, Germany's largest pollster, showed just 32% of Germans currently supporting the Christian Democrats. The AfD is polling nationally at 13%. The rise of AfD in Germany reflects a surge in far-right populist parties across Europe, and with it, a change in the political climate throughout the continent.
Gentlemen, let's take a closer look at Chancellor Angela Merkel. Do you think her days as the Prime Minister of Germany would be numbered, given the devastating setback in the state elections?
Well, I think so. There's another year. Elections will be in the fall, probably September 2017. And probably in the interest of the country and in the interest of her own party, she should perhaps consider maybe not to run again. Probably she will run it because she's one of those people that never gives up. She has strong beliefs, which is a positive aspect of any leader. But after many terms, we have to see what happens in the next 6 months, and those will be decisive if her presence in the party is an asset or a liability, and who will she be replaced by? That's another question. There is no clear substitute in the CD. So
obviously, Chancellor Angela Merkel has been alerted to the wake-up call. Do you think this is a game changer for German politics? And do you think she has been apologetic enough in her latest speech?
Exactly. I didn't find any apology from Chancellor Merkel's speaking, because yes, she expressed a kind of maybe regret for some saying, especially the necessity of reviewing this open door policy to refugees like that. But if we look at her stress that it should go back to many years ago. So we don't know what happened many years ago, because as we know, this open door policy to refugees was just launched in last year. So I think that perhaps at that time, I think Chancellor Merkel felt bigger and bigger pressure from her party and from her coalition. She has to do something, give some response to this failure of in the local election. But I still think that for Chancellor Merkel herself, she didn't think that this policy is wrong.
Well, let me cross over to Mr. Fraser Cameron, a senior research guy with the EU Asia Center. He's on the phone. Hello, Fraser.
Hi.
What do you think of the latest policy speech by Chancellor Angela Merkel, particularly with regard to the issue of immigrants?
Well, I think she recognized that there was a groundswell of opinion throughout Germany that said the Schaffen is not working. We're going to make it is not working. So she had to, I think, roll back from this commitment and give people certainly the feeling that the refugee crisis would no longer be of the same dimension as last year, that the German government was no longer going to have an open-door policy, and that she had been too optimistic in terms of the ability to deal with it. So I think she felt politically this was necessary in light of the recent electoral successes of the Alternative for Deutschland.
Merkel was accused by her critics of being defined to other member states of the European Union. Instead of being apologetic, she accused European leaders in other member states of not handling the issue of immigrants very well. She said European Union as a whole was not very cooperative. Do you think what she said carries some ring of truth?
Well, you know what happens when someone strongly believes in one idea, and she strongly believes in this open door policy for a country. People normally, this is a psychological issue. They would like that everyone shares their views with them. So in the ideal world, she would have liked Greece, Italy, where I come from, and all the countries where the migrants arrive, Spain, and the Mediterranean shore, would without question, the logic just agree with an open door policy like she says. Now, this cannot, those countries did not accept that. And so Angela Merkel decided to take a little bit of a antagonistic view against those countries, and this created a little bit of friction, unnecessary friction in Europe, because I want to say something. We talk about the migrant crisis, but I also think that the vote and the way the atmosphere, the political atmosphere is going on in Europe, it's not just about migrants. It's about people are unemployed, and this is not because there are 1 million people from Syria. This is going on for 10 years, so that's nothing to do with the migrant. So the economic situation is bad. The political situation is unclear. There is a tendency for protectionism on trade. We have the Brexit, currency, the extension of the power of the European Union,
and also the alleged failure of negotiations between the United States and the European Union for
on the TTIP. Of course, because how can we negotiate? Even as analysts, we don't know what's inside it, because it's a secret document shared only by certain people with unclear advantages for certain companies that can sue government. This is, and by the way, if Trump gets elected, this thing is dead.
But Hong Jian, do you think what we saw in the local elections in Germany actually forecasts the upcoming demise of the European Union and the borders for the free movement of labor forces across much of continental Europe will stop? And do you foresee disintegration of this, what used to be a very successful regional bloc?
Yeah. Yes, President Juncker of European Union answered the question that there is no issue of the integration of European Union. But frankly, I agree with Professor. Now we focus on this issue of refugee and migration, but indeed behind it, it's an issue of development, especially imbalance of development between North European countries, South European countries, and even imbalance of perception or understanding about the European Union, about the European integration between Western European country and the Eastern European country. So now the question is from this local election in Germany, but not only this local election in Germany, and also there are some other very important political event will happen in Europe. For example, there will be a referendum happened in Hungary on the 2nd of October on referendum on refuge itself, and also there will be something happen in Italy. How about this very hot debate on the exit from Euro, not from European Union, but from Euro. So we can find out the picture that more and more diversity or more and more different concern different interests from member states.
There's going to be more diversity across the broad spectrum of public opinions in the European Union. Now, Fraser, what's going to happen to CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, ruling party, which of course has its own coalition partner, and do you think this coalition government is likely to fall apart?
No, it's not going to fall apart. I think it's been quite stable, except that we've had the grand coalition so long in Germany now that, you know, some people are flocking to the Alternative for Deutschland, Greens, others simply saying that the two big parties represent too much of a consensus and don't take our into account. So I think the CDU will remain the largest party in Germany, will continue to have some problems with sister party in Bavaria, the CSU, but frankly there are no alternatives to these two sticking together. And the question for next year is whether the CDU finds a suitable coalition partner apart from the SPD, because people do want some change. It's unlikely that the SPD will be able to get enough votes to form a coalition with Die Linke, the left-wing party, plus the Greens. So it will depend on the number of votes that the CDU gets and the number of votes that the other smaller parties get to try and get like a rainbow coalition involving perhaps the FDP and the Greens, because I think there is a majority view in Germany that the grand coalition should be changed next year. So, and the CDU will certainly be the largest party again, that's quite clear.
I'm sorry for the poor sound quality of the telephone interview. Thank you very much for being with us, Fraser Cameron. He is the director of the EU Asia Center in Brussels. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, gentlemen, both the SDU, I mean the Socialist Democratic Party, and the CDU, the ruling party, the largest ruling party in Germany, received their lowest ever levels of support in the Berlin results. The right-wing Alternative for Germany, or AfD, Alternative for Deutschland party, got its highest, just over 14%. Sure. What does that mean, the rise of the far-right movement?
It's a very significant rise, because if you look at the ratio of what the consensus numbers were for the CDU divided by those of the Alternative for Deutschland, we're talking about 10, 15 times only several months ago. Now we're looking at twice, 3 times, 30 versus 15, 14. So the rise has been dramatic. Now, there is 2 ways to read that. This rise of right-wing populist movement is not a characteristic of Germany. We have it in Austria, we have it in Greece with Golden Dawn, we have it in Hungary, the closest border, we have it in Italy, we have it in France with Le Pen, we have it in the US with Trump. So this is something that's going on at the global level, and that's why I said these people were not just born yesterday as a result of the migrant crisis. These are right-wing people that have opposed in a way, let's say, the socialist less market-oriented policies of traditional socialist parties that look at maybe equal distribution of income, while the right-wing parties, let's think of Reagan, Thatcher, and even Deng Xiaoping, we're looking at market reforms. So let people earn for what they're worth. So people now have to decide in Europe, do we want a union? Do we want a society where everyone pretty much makes the same money, or do we reward entrepreneurship? Do we reward risks? This is a big philosophical question. Now, the question is impossible to answer when there is a European Union that tries to impose a unity on 4 levels: economic, monetary, political, and now even talking about military. Mm-hmm. You know, the European Union worked very well, and that answer that I raised before was easily answered when there was only economic union. The UK would take free trade of people, free trade of goods, without blinking an eye. What the UK, for example, does not want is Brussels to impose laws on the UK. Like if you have to make this pen 1 square centimeter and not 2, this is decided by Brussels. The British people said, no. You do it as you like, and if you want to buy from us, you buy, and it's fine to even accept people from Eastern European countries, from the Eastern expansion, Poland, they will do it. What they don't want is the unity in the monetary, which of course cannot create the flexibility to answer the question, do we want right policies, economic policies, or do we want a left economic policy? Equality or reward risk? It's a philosophical question that every country wants to answer in their own way, but you can't with the umbrella of 28.
Michele, we'll try to be more philosophical after we take this break. You are watching Dialogue with two gentlemen. We're discussing issues of the latest devastating campaign loss for Prime Minister Angela Merkel, as well as the message it delivered to the momentum against globalization with the rise of populism across the Atlantic Ocean. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Michele and Hong Jian, many would argue here in China who follow the development of globalization, perhaps this is a high time for us to take a second look at the issue of globalization. Massive protests took place outside the venue for negotiations on TTIP. And similar situations could be seen and observed elsewhere. Whenever leaders from around the world address the issue of globalization, there are beneficiaries who boast of the dividends of globalization. But I'm afraid the benefits of globalization are not shared proportionally across the world. Therefore, we need to take a close look at the driving forces behind the so-called deglobalization trend, which is displayed through cases like trade protectionism, anti-immigration, as well as in China. It's an open secret that many government officials or elites are not fans of universal values. And this, of course, drew a lot of fire from the West, who follow the development of Chinese political and social progress. So what do you think of the alleged trend against globalization?
Yeah, I think that, yes, firstly, the question is how many definition about the globalization, because from each economy, from each country, they do have a different understanding about the globalization. Second question is, how about this, separation of the, or always from some of the European countries and some Western countries, they want to, take China or some emerging economies as a winner of the globalization, and also contribute some problem, especially internal problem, to this very, very drastic competition with China or some other emerging economies. So I think that this issue now has been politicalization in some countries. And also the third issue is, yes, always, because if there is a trend of globalization on global level, certainly different thinking or different feeling from different regions and countries. If we say that China or some other emerging economies as a winner of globalization, certainly some region or countries like countries in Middle East or North Africa, certainly they are loser of the globalization. So now the question is, firstly, we need to understand this. Certainly, just like everything, globalization should have the bright side and the dark side. And we need to try to enlarge the bright side and to overcome its shortcomings like that. Just like what happened in the recent G20 summit, that we should, yes, recognize the globalization is a natural trend, could not be stopped by any country or any people. At the same time, we need to strengthen the management to globalization, which means to avoid its negative side. So now the question for Europe, I think that now the question is for people, for government, because as we know, European countries, they lived in a long time for peace and prosperity. So now for the government, lack of dynamic to reform it. I think that's a very, very big problem. So once this government in Europe I think get some more dynamic to reform the governance and to promote the efficiency of government, I think nobody will lose so much in the globalization.
Well, Michele, very much like what happens in Russia, Japan, where populations are getting old, most member states of the old part of Europe, in fact, has benefited enormously from the free movement of labor force, say, such flow from the Central and Eastern European countries to the Western European countries.
Absolutely.
But today, it seems the borders are likely to be closed,
Yes.
with the leaders in their campaigns vowing to protect their own markets and their own jobs. What's going to happen next?
This is very unfortunate. In the old days, I'm one of the beneficiaries. I went from Italy to study in the UK and then the US, so I'm an example of how free borders help. China is another example of how free trades from 2001 after joining WTO boosted the Chinese economy. People gain from this kind of globalization, trade of goods, movement of people. The problem is that there are limited resources, so the extent and the speed of these flows need to be managed very carefully. It is fine if Michele goes to England. One other thing, if there were 20 million Italians all wanted to go and study in London. There are limits to this issue. So what the people are now, what the politicians now are trying to do is to build this wall. I don't mean the wall like physical wall, but stepping back, including Angela Merkel, who says, oh, I should have done something better before, because now they realize that the extent and the speed of this integration is faster than what people are ready to accept. Example of Germany successful. There is lots of there's a big Turkish community in Germany. There's never been, or at least there's not really caught the news about big problems of integration, because it was done in a managed way. It's not 1 million people in 1 year arriving in Germany, increasing population by 1%. Now, you mentioned the growing population and the aging population. It's a problem we shared by Japan, by the way, also by China, because of the one-child policy has decreased the pool of young people. And so we want to replenish these young people with migrants. But again, a migrant normally needs time to produce. It's like almost having a child. Things get a little bit worse on the economic sense. You need to pay to train them before they can start produce. Now, politicians don't have this long-term horizon. Merkel is worried about September.
Michele, you only spoke of the limitations of resources. But what about the cultural, religious, and ethnic clashes between white Europeans and those non-white Europeans? I mean, with the exodus of Muslim refugees seeking asylum for one reason or another from the volatile Middle East region to the highly prosperous European countries, what does that mean for Christian churches, Catholic churches, and the lone wolf attacks that we saw in Venice, not Venice, but Nice, the lorry attacks?
Yes, I think that some people regard this as negative side of globalization, but certainly, I mean, globalization means more free movement, just like the professor mentioned, and more engagement with different religions, different culture. But now the question is, just like we find out what happened in some part of the world. Certainly, for Europe, for China, or some other countries, we can try to keep the stability and the prosperity of the economy. But for some other regions, perhaps maybe the lack of global economic governance and or some other problem. So it's an imbalance on the global level. So that's the reason why, for this moment, we need more efforts from every country, including European Union, Germany, and China, to do something more to provide more public goods to help deal with the imbalance of the development. And also, at the same time, we need to promote this cultural tolerance, even for European Union and even for China, because I still remember some years ago, Germany, France, and some other European countries, they had to recognize the failure of multiculturalism. I don't think it's a real failure. It just shows the reluctance of some European government to do something more to help this coexistence between different religions, different cultures.
It's very interesting you mentioned this today. Today, Pope Francis in Rome proclaimed a day of peace with no colors, no religion, no churches. The value of an Italian citizen is the same as any other countries, as a Chinese, American, Russian, Japanese. There's no distinction. We should move away from these frictions between people. And I have to say, people naturally accept people who have different views. It's when imposed from the above, from governments forced, that people start getting a little bit angry. You lived in London like me. There's never been people coming from Jamaica.
Very quickly, gentlemen, what do you think of the political fortune of Angela Merkel, who is widely regarded as a strong woman, assuming strong European leadership? Now, if something unfortunate would happen to her 1 year from now in the general election, if the CDU lost the coalition partner of a Socialist Democratic Party, if political reconfiguration surprises the whole of Europe, what's going to happen to the lack of or absence of a strong European leadership? Germany is, after all, the powerhouse of the European economic recovery.
I still have some more optimistic view on destiny of Chancellor Merkel, because there are still time enough for her and her party to do something to save up the situation. And of course, otherwise, if there is a weak Germany or weak government in future Germany, yes, I think it will be very big problem for European integration, because now to some degree, for some member states in European Union to look for the leaders from Berlin become more and more a nature or logic. But of course, once there is a weak German government in future, perhaps it will give more dynamic to other member states, like Italy, to shoulder more and more responsibility.
Very quickly, Merkel, do you think the strong rebound of nationalist sentiment in Europe will start to erode the process of regional integration and even the process of globalization?
No, I don't think so. In a way, I know Angela Merkel has done very good things, but I hope she loses the election and she leaves, because we do not want dominance in any country. We don't want Greece to be dominant, we don't want Germany to be dominant, or Italy. It's a union of 28 countries, equal. We don't need one strong leader, incidentally always from the same country. Even a crisis potentially could be a wake-up call for people in Brussels to say, okay, now like the G20. Why did we have the G20? Because the G7, G8 didn't work. And so people invited the BRICS countries to cooperate.
Next time, when we come back, we'll discuss your allegation about majority tyranny, who do not want to be dominated by a strong leadership in continental Europe. I promise to bring you guys back and discuss this serious issue. But with that, we come to the end of this edition of Dialogue on the outcome, political fallout of the German elections. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.